Welcome to Shorty SuperCoach, and today we're going to preview the Melbourne Football Club's SuperCoach prospects for 2017. Now, of course, if you haven't caught these previews so far, we're going through each and every club and just taking a look at some of their potential breakout candidates, perhaps someone coming back from injury, just generally guys that you should have on your SuperCoach radar at this time of year and worth discussing. Now, the Dees definitely have a few. I mean, a lot of people expect them to jump up the ladder. I share that view. I think they've definitely got a talented list with a couple of good acquisitions and a few players coming back in the side after suspensions last year. So I think they could be a team that really could catapult up the ladder, and no doubt it'll be led by Max Gawn. I mean, he's their best player, one of the best players in the competition, an absolute superstar. Now, last year he really exploded. Of course, in 2015, that back end of his year was very impressive, where he really established himself as a real prospect. But the question and the jury was always out on whether he could do it for a full season. 2015 saw him average 102.1 miles, up from his 63.2, and it just took him a long time to get his body right. He had a lot of injuries as he developed as a young ruckman, but once he put it all together, it was a joy to watch. Last year, averaged 118.5 and just was absolutely dominant. I mean, he did have some poor games, but he made up for it and then some. He had enormous games, which just resulted in that fantastic average, third best in the comp. He had some massive scores, as I alluded to. 172, 160, 174, 167, 141, 168, 151. Now, those numbers are unheard of, really. I mean, they are elite mid numbers. It's unbelievable. Now, of course, he did throw in the odd 50, some 60s, I think a 70 odd. But he just made up for it enormously with those huge scores. Now, I guess the question could be asked, his ceiling is enormous. Imagine if he added a little bit more consistency this year. Could that see him average around the 120 mark or maybe even a little bit more? That'll be what a lot of coaches are hoping, because he's most definitely been a very popular pick, and the popular line of thought is going for a Gawn-Goldstein combination, maybe spicing things up with a Grundy. I don't think it's as simple as that, but I'll delve into that as the pre-season moves along a little bit and we preview some exact positions and structures. But nonetheless, you'll have to pay $645k for Gawn. You're really going to have to fork out a lot of cash. He's the dominant big man in the competition, gets a lot of his points from hit-outs to advantage, can kick goals, 7th rank in contested marks in the competition as well. So he goes big points from contested grabs, gets around the ground pretty well too, and gets involved, average about 14 touches. So I'm not telling you anything you don't know when I say Gawn's a superstar, but I don't think I'll be starting with him, to be honest. I think there's not better options out there. That'd be the wrong way to say it, but I think there's certainly more affordable options. And put it this way, I think Gawn could most definitely average around 120 again. But when you put the chips down and you pay nearly $650,000 for a bloke, you want to be absolutely certain you're going to get bang for your buck, and he's going to deliver, with the likes of Ablett in the past and banking on players that we know are consistent year in, year out performers. Gawn is not that. Of course, he looks like he could be, but as I mentioned, his body has let him down in the past. That is still a risk. I know he played 22 games last year, but he could go down again. He's got a history. Let's hope he doesn't, but he could. Now, that's one risk. Another risk is that, will he be able to keep up such a high standard of football? You know, it's not easy to do that. Will he drop off ever so slightly? He is capable, as I said, of having somewhat of a roller coaster. Obviously, last year he had much more higher end on that roller coaster, but he is capable of throwing in a low score or two. Does that give the train of thought to go, well, maybe we could pick him up cheaper in the early parts of the season? That's also a way you could go about it. I don't think I'll be picking him. I think Goldstein's definitely a lock for me, and I think I'm going to follow it up with perhaps a lesser light, not quite your premium status, but one that I can feel can jump into the elite. I just think it's an enormous amount of money to pay for a guy that still has elements of risk. Now, I'm not trying to pour cold water over Gawn's prospects. I did similar to Dangerfield, And I guess my thoughts on both of them are somewhat similar. I think they're unbelievable players and are every chance to back it up. But the fact is, when you pay that sort of money, you want to be without a shadow of a doubt that they can produce it. Now, I think Dangerfield's more of a chance to back it up than Gawn, but nonetheless, I think, especially when you go the ruck division, there's only two. You want to get it right. You know, you got to take all things to an account. Now, another point to look at it is that we're going to want to start with Gawn. If we don't start with Gawn, we're going to want to have him in our side at some stage. I think a lot of people have Goldstein, and then a lot of people will be looking at, say, Grundy or someone else. There's not too many mid-price options going around. So naturally, if there was a mid-price option, you might go, look, we'll just pick up Gawn when so-and-so appreciates in value. He'll drop a bit. My mid-price ruck will go up in price nicely. Everyone's winning. Happy days. We probably don't have that real genuine mid-price option at this stage. So it really means if you don't start with Gawn, are you then going to have an opportunity to pick him up? Because naturally, I think most people are going to set and forget. So you would think if you don't start with Gawn, then are you going to be able to pick him up? Because you wouldn't want to start with a Mumford or a Jacobs and then trade him to Gawn. If you're picking those guys, you're picking them as keepers. So there's a lot of thought to go into this selection, and no doubt we'll talk about it throughout the season as it goes on, but it's very, very tough. I mean, it's a huge amount of money. Can he back it up? Can he stay on the field? I think he'll score extremely well again. I just don't know at what stage in the season he will. I'm wary, as I've said. It's not to totally rule him out, but I would just like to see him really looking in the sort of nick that he was last year through the pre-season. He looked unbelievable, just physically and just the way he was getting around the ground. You could just tell he was a man in form and at the peak of his powers. I think we'd like to see assurance of that in the pre-season, just to reassure us that, all right, he's still the man, he's still the best ruckman in the comp, pick him with confidence. So that's probably the only asterisk I'll have on Gawn. We'll move on to a couple other guys for the Dees. There's a few others, not too many, but a couple of guys in the back line that we should give a little bit of thought to. Now, Bernie Vince. Now, price of $501k. He bodes as quite a unique player. Now, I haven't seen him talked about much or selected in too many teams, and probably with reason. We have been showered with quite a few good options in the defence too, and just the way the year's turned out, there are quite a lot of quite likeable young types coming through with our defence, with the likes of Laird and Johannesson, and of course Adams is being given that position status as well. So Vince, probably at 31 years of age, hasn't been considered as much. And I guess the question is he going to be a POD? Is he one that we could possibly pick up and give us a real edge on the rest of the competition? I would have to err on the side of no. I think we saw some good numbers from Vince last year with 92.1 average, 98.1 the year before, 95.2. So he's no stranger to some solid averages, but I can see that declining again. Now, it declined a little bit from the 98.1. I could probably see it going down to your high 80s once more. The reason being, I just think he might play a bit more of a secondary role in that Melbourne side, a bit more of a specialist role, perhaps off a half-back flank, or maybe playing defensive at times in the midfield. I just don't think he's the main man in the midfield anymore. Once upon a time, the Dees really relied on Jones and Vince to shoulder quite a load, but now they've brought in Lewis. The improvement of Viney is evident. Dom Tyson is ever improving. Jones is still there, of course, but it's young talent like Petrarca, Oliver and Brayshaw that are really going to be given great opportunity for the Dees in that engine room to really show their stuff. And I think by no means will Bernie be pushed aside and just thrown to a back pocket, but I think he just may have less midfield minutes and more of a secondary role to play. And I just feel that could be ever so slightly see him drop off to around your 86, 89 mark, somewhere in between there. And I certainly don't see his average going up. Now, he averaged 92. We'd be picking him in the hope that he rises to above 95. And I think at best, I would say he'd stagnate around your low 90s. So I wouldn't be picking Bernie, as much of an interesting selection he could be, and a quality player in the past. I'd probably steer clear. One man who's certainly been given a fair bit of airtime is Michael Hibberd. Now, a fan favourite of years gone by. Of course, he missed last season being part of the Essendon 34, and the remaining players that were in the system, of course, he suffered that 12-month ban, as did Melksham for the Dees. Hibberd, I think he's attracting a fair bit of attention because he's priced very cheaply, $402,000. And when we think of him, we think running defender. The Dees need one. He's a nice kick. He's cheap. No-brainer. Lock him in. I don't think it's as simple as that. And for mine, he's not in my team at the moment. That's not to totally rule him out, because I think if there's one position on the ground that the Dees would like to fill, it is that genuine rebounding defender. Jaden Hunt has showed dash at times. Christian Salem, they'll be hoping to do that at times. Bernie Vince has done it at times. And maybe even Melksham may roll off there. But Hibberd is your genuine, proven rebounder and ball user off the back line. So a position is there for him. The worry and the caution with mine for him is the fact that in 2015, he only averaged 82.1. Now, that was, of course, coming off averages of 95.9 and 91.4. If we really drum it down, he's probably only had one premium year. That was 2013, where he burst on the scene, averaged 95.9. Now, part of me feels like the two reasons that I'd be concerned about this selection is, A, he may have been worked out by a few clubs. I think the competition has certainly got a hold of what he was about. His predominant left foot kick could not kick on his right. And I think clubs really found a way to hem him in and really force him and rush him on that left-hand side and corner him in on the right. That definitely happened more often than it did in his early years. And I also think they gave him a bit more attention. As always the case, when a defender gets off the chain, you got to pay him a bit more attention. I think that was a combination that certainly saw his scores drop a little bit. The other part is that the fact I think he just relies on too few things to score him points. His main way of scoring points is handball receives, run and dash, and then using the ball. He loves to get on the end of it, link up, doesn't win much of his own ball, very low contested possession numbers, very low tackle numbers. So I guess the concern there is the fact that if he does get a bit of attention from an opposition player, where is he going to go from there? He doesn't give you too many other options to score points. He doesn't take too many marks. He's not a tackler. He's very limited to where he can score points. That's a concern of mine. Now, in 2015, I had Hibberd. I thought 91.9 average, whatever it was, in 2014. I think he can build on that. He certainly did not. He has a low ceiling, but what I picked him for was consistency. And he delivered that, but it was consistency of 80s and 90s, not 90s and 100s. So he certainly dropped it back just a touch, and therefore he dropped 9 points per game. I'd be a little bit concerned for those reasons I mentioned. Watch him through the pre-season. If he's really flying and looks to have really locked himself into that key ball user off the half-back line for the Dees, and they want it in his hand at every opportunity, then that's when I definitely prick my ears up and have a listen and see how he's going. But at this stage, I think we do have a fair few options, and I could certainly see him averaging low 90s and things like that. But I think there's definitely players, and quite a number of players in our back line, that are capable of averaging high 90s, definitely even three figures. So that's food for thought. I know he's a popular selection, so some people may disagree with me. Certainly if you do, let me know. It always is good to discuss these things, and he could be a bit of a thought provoker throughout the pre-season, Mr. Hibberd. So a couple of other guys. I mean, that's probably mainly a wrap for the Dees, but a few young guys that could attract a little bit of attention. Christian Salem, defender, midfielder, priced at, what is he, $379. No, he's just a defender, just a defender. But nonetheless, he's attracted a lot of attention because he's a former top pick, lovely ball user, a bloke who hasn't really had a fair crack at it yet. Could this be his year? It could be, but I wouldn't be going with him. Simply too awkward a price tag. As I've said with guys in the past, as I said with defenders just there, we've got a lot of good options, some handy mid-price options too. So I wouldn't even consider that. Angus Brayshaw, a mid-forward, you can snap him up for 353k. I think he's a prime candidate to really improve his average significantly, but by no means is it enough to jump up into the selection that we would want for our forward lines. As is the case with Salem, he's a former top pick, a very highly touted player. But as I often say with mid-price options, unless they're about to absolutely explode, I don't think they're worth selecting. Brayshaw probably falls into that category of impressive development and will just progress nicely, maybe up his average by 15 points even, but it's probably not going to be enough. Christian Petrarca is probably the one I like the most out of that trio of young guys. You can get him in the forward line, 395,000. I certainly think if he can get a bit of opportunity in midfield and play basically permanent midfield, he could be capable of going somewhere in the 90s, I really feel. I wouldn't be picking him because, as I listed off, the Dees have a relatively long list of solid defenders, solid midfielders I should say, a long list in the likes of Lewis, Vince, Jones, Viney, Tyson, and those young guys, as well as Clayton Oliver. So I think it's pretty hot for spots in there. But I definitely think down the track, Petrarca will be very much a popular pick for SuperCoach. Will it be this year? You'd have to see a lot of positive signs because he's not cheap. You'd have to have a fair bit of convincing. But I think at this stage he's one to maybe keep an eye on for your draft side as well. Finally, I might just touch on Jordan Lewis very briefly. I think often when a guy of that calibre changes clubs, he immediately attracts attention, and of course fantasy coaches like to have a look at it, but do not consider him at all. He's never been a massive fantasy player. I know he averaged around 109 at one point in his probably career best season. He's just always been consistent numbers, probably your high 90s to mid 100s. Very consistent, mind you, and he will take on a bit more of a role with the Dees, but he's getting older. I don't think he's going to explode at this stage. Quite simply, I'd expect him to average nice numbers, but don't get carried away just because he's changed clubs and he's an ex-Hawk, he's a champion. Don't get carried away. I don't think his ceiling is high enough, and I don't think I really have to tell you too much else. I haven't seen him in many teams, and I think for good reason. I think he's a great pickup for the Dees, not a great pickup for your SuperCoach side. So that's a bit of a wrap for the Melbourne Footy Club anyway. They certainly provide some interesting options in what will be a definitely much improved Melbourne side, I would have thought. They showed some great signs throughout the year, and you would expect them to consolidate on that and have a much more consistent season and really push for the top 8. Next up, we'll be having a look at North Melbourne. I haven't looked at their list yet, but off the top of my head, I wouldn't have thought there'd be too many guys. Certainly, other than Goldstein, they'll be really pressed for options as they probably decline a bit, but we'll take a bit of a look at that in a few days' time. If you're enjoying what I'm doing, give me a comment, let me know how I'm going. Even just a shout out. If you've been watching all these previews and you haven't left a comment yet, by all means do. It's always good to see the ones that regularly comment. That's great. I really enjoy seeing regular comments from quite a few regular guys at the moment, but it's always great to see a different name pop up as well, and just to know that, you know, some different people are watching and having a comment. Always good to get a bit of discussion going through the comments also. And as always, subscribe to my channel and give it a like if you're enjoying what I'm doing. That's always great to see a few more subscribers jump on board as we build into the SuperCoach and AFL pre-season. So I'll be back soon, and I'll catch you later.